The war should have ended in 11 days. That was the official prediction made by the Zarvath Empire before their fleets crossed into human space. 11 days to destroy Earth's outer defenses. 11 days to break the Terran colonies. 11 days to force humanity into unconditional surrender. The Zarvath had conquered 19 civilizations before humanity. Some species resisted for months. A few lasted years. But eventually every one of them understood the same truth. The empire was too large, too organized, too powerful to stop. The Zarvath believed humans would learn that lesson quickly. Instead, the humans taught the empire something else entirely. The first battle took place above Kepri Station near the edge of the Soul Trade Corridor. The station itself was unimportant. A mining relay, a fuel processing hub, barely 8,000 personnel, mostly civilians. The Zarvath attacked it because it was exposed and weak. Destroying it would send a message deeper into human territory. Resistance is useless. That had always worked before. A Zarvath strike fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 7 warships surrounded the station within minutes. Their commander, High Captain Vorak, transmitted surrender demands immediately. He expected panic, fear, perhaps desperate negotiations. Instead, he received a short transmission from the station commander. The message contained only 4 words. "We are still here." Vorak ordered the attack without hesitation. Station defenses collapsed almost instantly. Human patrol craft burned in orbit. Docking rings lost atmosphere. Entire sections of the station went dark. Everything proceeded exactly according to standard Zarvath doctrine. Until the boarding phase began. That was where the problem started. The Zarvath military relied heavily on shock assault tactics, fast entry, overwhelming pressure, psychological domination. Most species folded quickly once enemy soldiers entered their corridors. Humans did not. The first boarding team entered Section 9 through a maintenance breach near the reactor level. 32 Zarvath assault troops. Elite soldiers in reinforced combat armor, heavily armed, highly trained. They disappeared 17 minutes later. No survivors. No distress calls. Just silence. Vorak believed communication failure was responsible. He sent a second team, then a third. Both vanished as well. Internal station sensors showed only fragments of movement. Lights flickering. Pressure doors opening and closing. Small heat signatures appearing briefly before disappearing again. The humans knew the station better than the invaders, and they used every corridor like a weapon. Gravity systems malfunctioned at precise moments. Life support vents released freezing coolant into choke points. Maintenance tunnels collapsed behind advancing troops. Zarvath soldiers began dying without ever seeing who killed them. One surviving officer later described the experience during classified testimony. He said fighting humans inside the station felt less like combat and more like entering a machine designed to hate them personally. The battle lasted 19 hours. When it finally ended, Kepri Station was barely functional. Nearly 40% of the structure had been destroyed during the fighting, but the station had not fallen. Out of 8 Zarvath boarding units, only 3 returned, and those survivors came back terrified. High Captain Vorak withdrew his fleet the next morning. Officially, he cited reactor instability and unacceptable strategic losses. Unofficially, something else had happened. His soldiers no longer wanted to go back inside the station. News of Kepri spread quickly through the empire. At first, the military dismissed it as an unfortunate operational anomaly. Humans were new enemies. New enemies always behaved unpredictably during initial engagements. But then came Orlan Colony, and after Orlan came Black Reef Outpost, then Vesta Anchorage. Again and again, the same pattern emerged. Human forces lost space superiority quickly. Human fleets retreated constantly. Human colonies suffered catastrophic damage. Yet every ground engagement turned into a nightmare for the Zarvath military. The humans never fought directly unless forced. They delayed, distracted, separated units from support, destroyed supply lines, manipulated terrain, and worst of all, they adapted unbelievably fast. A tactic that worked against humans once almost never worked again. Zarvith commanders found themselves rewriting operational plans daily, trying to predict human responses. The predictions kept failing. Inside the Imperial War Ministry, concern quietly began spreading. Not fear yet, just confusion. The Empire had fought technologically superior species before. It had fought larger species, stronger species, more intelligent species, but humanity behaved differently from all of them. Humans appeared comfortable, operating under terrible conditions. They tolerated uncertainty unusually well. They continued resisting even after situations became obviously hopeless. This deeply unsettled the Zarvith command structure because the Empire's entire military philosophy depended on psychological collapse, break enemy morale quickly, force surrender, move on efficiently. Humans refused to cooperate with this process. The War Ministry eventually assigned strategic analyst Thelvar to study the Terrans directly. Thelvar was considered one of the Empire's finest military minds. Calm, methodical, emotionally disciplined. He spent 3 weeks reviewing combat footage from every major engagement against humanity. Afterward, he submitted a private report marked High Threat Priority. The opening statement alarmed the Imperial Council immediately. Humans do not organize warfare around survival probability. The Council demanded clarification. Thelvar explained carefully. Most species avoided combat situations where victory chances dropped below acceptable thresholds. Humans did not. Instead, humans appeared willing to continue operations indefinitely as long as resistance remained physically possible. Thelvar included examples. At Orlan Colony, human engineers deliberately overloaded their own power grid to trap invading forces inside, collapsing transit tunnels. At Black Reef Outpost, Terran Marines fought for 6 straight hours without resupply after losing command structure and communications entirely. At Vesta Anchorage, wounded human pilots intentionally crashed damaged fighters into Zarvith landing platforms after ammunition depletion. None of these actions made sense, according to standard Imperial doctrine. That was exactly the problem. The humans did not think like predictable enemies. And unpredictability spreads fear faster than superior weapons ever can. The Imperial Council reviewed the report in silence. One counselor eventually asked the question no one wanted answered. Can they be understood? Thelvar considered carefully before responding. Yes, he said slowly, but understanding them may not help us defeat them. That answer stayed inside the council chamber long after the meeting ended. Meanwhile, the war continued growing worse. The Zarvith Empire pushed deeper toward core human systems with overwhelming fleet superiority. Entire Terran colonies burned. Millions fled inward toward Earth and Mars. Officially, humanity was losing badly. But strangely, the humans did not seem discouraged by this reality. That confused the Empire almost as much as the battlefield losses themselves. Zarvith intelligence intercepted Terran military communications constantly during the war. The messages rarely contained panic. Even after disasters, even after mass casualties, human officers focused almost obsessively on adaptation. What failed? What changed? What could still be used? It was as if humans viewed defeat differently than other species. Not as an ending, but as information. That realization slowly began infecting the Empire's thinking, and infection was the correct word, because by the 4th month of the war, Zarvith soldiers had started developing a new battlefield superstition. If human forces suddenly retreated without explanation, leave immediately. The superstition emerged after the disaster at Colony Theta 9, an industrial moon near the Perseus shipping lanes. Imperial forces landed expecting minimal resistance. Instead, they found the colony almost entirely abandoned. No civilians, no visible military units, only empty streets and dark buildings. The silence disturbed several officers immediately, but Imperial command ordered the advance to continue. 3 hours later, the colony exploded. Not from one massive detonation, thousands of smaller explosions carefully hidden throughout infrastructure systems. Transit rails, fuel depots, maintenance conduits, atmospheric processors. The entire colony transformed into a coordinated death trap. Over 11,000 Zarvath troops died before evacuation succeeded. Human casualties were estimated at fewer than 300. The surviving Imperial officers returned deeply shaken. One statement from the battle became infamous afterward. "They knew we would come," a commander reported. "They built the entire colony into a weapon and waited for us to walk inside." After Theta 9, strategic analyst Thelvar updated his report again. This time he added a recommendation never before written in Imperial military history. Avoid direct planetary engagements against Terran forces whenever possible. The recommendation triggered outrage among several senior commanders. The Zarvath Empire did not avoid battle. It conquered battle, yet privately, many officers already understood why the recommendation existed. Because something dangerous was happening across the warfront. The Empire was still winning territory. But humans were changing the emotional shape of the war itself. And deep beneath all the official reports and strategic calculations, the Zarvath military had started asking a terrifying question. What happens if humans never decide they are defeated? By the 6th month of the war, the Zarvath Empire controlled nearly a third of human frontier territory. Official military projections still favored total Imperial victory. Human fleet losses remained severe. Several colonies had already fallen completely. Trade routes into the Sol system were under constant attack. And yet, the mood inside the Imperial War Ministry continued getting worse. No one said it openly. The Empire still possessed overwhelming strength, but strength no longer felt comforting. Every victory against humanity carried strange costs afterward. Supply depots vanished. Communication relays malfunctioned. Entire patrol groups disappeared in supposedly secured territory. Small things at first, then larger things, then things impossible to explain logically. One Zarvath battle group arrived at the colony world Hadion, expecting reinforcement ships at orbital position markers. The reinforcements never appeared. 3 days later, investigators discovered the navigation data had been altered during transmission by a human infiltration unit operating from a captured listening station nearly 2 systems away. The humans had redirected an entire fleet movement using nothing but stolen codes and patience. Strategic analyst Thelvar reviewed the incident personally. He noticed something disturbing immediately. The humans were no longer merely reacting to the Empire. They were shaping Imperial behavior deliberately. That realization changed the entire war. Because if humans understood how the Empire thought, then every Imperial response could become predictable, and predictable enemies are vulnerable enemies. Thelvar requested authorization to study Terran military history directly. At first, the Council resisted. Humanity was still considered technologically inferior overall. Studying them too closely felt unnecessary to several senior officials. But battlefield reports kept arriving, and every report carried the same uncomfortable pattern. Human forces kept surviving situations they should not survive. Eventually, the Council approved access to archived human historical records recovered from captured colonies. Thelvar spent 12 straight days inside the military archive chambers beneath the capital world, Zaros. What he found unsettled him deeply. Human history was almost entirely built around conflict, not endless victory, endless struggle. Civil wars, world wars, revolutions, insurgencies, economic collapses, political fragmentation, resource shortages, environmental disasters. Human civilization had survived centuries of instability before ever reaching space. Most species unified first and expanded second. Humanity had expanded while still chaotic. Thelvar began understanding something important. Humans did not fear disorder the way other civilizations did. They were born from it. A particularly troubling document described ancient Terran guerrilla warfare tactics from centuries before spaceflight. Small resistance groups repeatedly defeating stronger occupying armies through sabotage, misinformation, ambushes, and psychological exhaustion. The historical similarities to current battlefield conditions were impossible to ignore. Humanity had not invented these methods recently. They had been refining them for thousands of years. Thelvar submitted another classified report to the Imperial Council. This one contained a sentence that caused visible discomfort during review. The Terrans appear uniquely adapted for prolonged asymmetric warfare. Several counselors challenged the conclusion immediately. The Empire had crushed insurgencies before. Dozens of them. Thelvar agreed calmly. Then he explained the difference. Most insurgencies eventually desired survival more than resistance. Humans appeared capable of making the opposite calculation. That silence afterward lasted a very long time. Meanwhile, across occupied systems, human resistance activity intensified dramatically, not through massive offensives, through constant pressure, tiny operations everywhere at once, fuel contamination inside Imperial depots, navigation interference along supply corridors, false distress signals pulling patrol ships into empty sectors, targeted attacks against logistics hubs instead of frontline fleets. The Empire could still win battles, but sustaining control became increasingly difficult. The humans understood something fundamental about warfare. Armies require supplies more desperately than glory. One incident on Varnus Prime became infamous throughout the Empire afterward. The planet itself held little strategic value, but its orbital shipyards repaired nearly 12% of all Imperial warships operating in the sector. Security around the facility was extreme. Orbital defense platforms, constant patrouille rotation, biometric scanning systems, multiple internal checkpoints. The humans attacked anyway. Not with fleets. With 6 people, the infiltration team arrived hidden inside a civilian salvage convoy 3 weeks before the operation began. For 19 days, they did absolutely nothing suspicious. They unloaded cargo, performed maintenance work, ate in public canteens, blended into thousands of laborers moving through the station daily. Imperial security never noticed them. Then one night the shipyard shut down completely. Every dry dock, every repair line, every reactor feed system simultaneously disabled. The damage itself was almost laughably small. Several coolant regulators altered, power synchronization delays introduced into maintenance software, tiny changes individually, harmless. Together, catastrophic. The repair network collapsed across the entire station within minutes. And because the systems failed internally, the Empire initially believed sabotage impossible. By the time investigators discovered what happened, the human team was already gone. No dramatic escape, no firefight. They simply vanished back into civilian traffic. Repairs took nearly 5 weeks. 5 weeks without functioning shipyard capacity across the sector. The economic losses alone were staggering. The psychological damage was worse, because the Empire finally understood something terrifying. Human soldiers did not need battlefield superiority to hurt them. They only needed access. After Varnus Prime, paranoia spread rapidly through Imperial infrastructure systems. Security screenings intensified everywhere. Workers faced repeated inspections. Military checkpoints multiplied across occupied worlds, and every increase in security created new logistical slowdowns. The humans exploited further. Humanity had turned the Empire's own caution into another weapon. Inside the Terran resistance itself, organization remained surprisingly decentralized. That confused Imperial intelligence repeatedly. Captured resistance fighters rarely possessed strategic information beyond their immediate operations. Cells operated independently, adapted independently, even failed independently. Destroying one group accomplished very little because another always appeared somewhere else. Human resistance behaved less like an army and more like a living system, constantly reorganizing itself. Thelvar described it privately as combat evolution, and the more he studied humanity, the more unsettled he became. One evening, he reviewed surveillance footage recovered from an abandoned Terran relay station on the moon Ceres. The station had been evacuated during an Imperial advance. Most data was destroyed before capture, but one recording survived partially intact. The footage showed exhausted human personnel preparing demolition charges throughout the facility. The Empire expected fear in recordings like these. Panique, despair. Instead, the humans joked quietly while working, shared food, checked each other's injuries. One soldier paused briefly near the camera before speaking towards someone off-screen. "If this slows them down another day, it's worth it." The recording ended shortly afterward when the station self-destructed. Thalvar replayed the footage 7 times, not because of the tactics, because of the emotional tone. The humans genuinely believed sacrifice could still matter even in defeat. That mindset was extraordinarily dangerous, especially against an empire designed around intimidation. By the 8th month of the war, human resistance had begun affecting Imperial soldiers psychologically. Nightmares became common among frontline units assigned to Terran sectors. Troops feared abandoned structures, silent colony, unexpected retreats. Even ordinary maintenance failures triggered anxiety now, because humans had conditioned the Empire to expect hidden consequences everywhere. One Imperial commander summarized the situation during a classified briefing. "With other species, occupation ends resistance," he said. "With humans, occupation seems to create more of it." The statement circulated quietly through command circles afterward. And then came the disaster at Harrow Reach. The moment the Empire finally understood how serious the situation had become, Harrow Reach was supposed to secure the outer approach toward Mars, an enormous military staging station built inside a hollowed asteroid cluster. Nearly 70,000 Imperial personnel operated there. Fleet Command believed the station untouchable. Its defenses were immense, its location heavily fortified, its patrol coverage constant. No major human fleet remained close enough to threaten it directly. That assumption lasted until the station's reactors shut down simultaneously during peak operational cycle. Emergency systems activated instantly, then failed. Docking controls malfunctioned, communications arrays overloaded, defense cannons locked into maintenance mode, and 30 seconds later, the human attack craft emerged from inside the asteroid field itself. Not dozens, only 9. Small, fast, almost insignificant against a station that size. But they were never intended to destroy Harrow Reach conventionally. They targeted navigation systems, reactor synchronization nodes, fuel transfer conduit, every critical vulnerability, carefully selected beforehand. The attack lasted 11 minutes. The station remained crippled for nearly 4 months. Imperial losses exceeded anything humanity had achieved previously. And worst of all, the humans escaped afterward. Every one of them. The Empire launched immediate investigations into how the operation succeeded. What investigators discovered frightened the Imperial Council deeply. The attack had been prepared for over 5 months. Human operatives embedded false maintenance data gradually across dozens of systems during earlier skirmishes. They manipulated supply manifests, inserted tiny software irregularities, altered inspection records by fractions small enough to avoid notice. Harrow Reach had not fallen because humans attacked successfully. It fell because humans had been preparing the battlefield long before the Empire realized a battle existed. That revelation changed everything, because the Zarvith Empire suddenly understood the true danger humanity represented. Humans did not simply fight wars differently. They thought about war differently. For the first time in Imperial history, senior military officials began discussing the possibility that victory itself might become impossible. And somewhere far inside Imperial territory, a classified recommendation quietly entered preliminary review: avoid direct engagement with Terran soldiers whenever possible, not because humans were physically superior, but because every battle against them seemed to create problems that lasted long after the shooting stopped. The Empire had invaded humanity, expecting conquest. Instead, it had started teaching itself to fear human soldiers. The recommendation remained unofficial at first. No empire wanted to admit fear publicly, especially not the Zarvith Empire. For centuries, their military reputation had been built on certainty. Every conquered civilization reinforced the same belief: resistance delayed defeat. Nothing more. Humanity was supposed to become another example of that principle. Instead, the war kept becoming stranger. By the beginning of the second year, the Empire still controlled vast sections of human territory, but maintaining that territory now consumed enormous resources. Supply convoys required escort fleets. Escort fleets required additional fuel depots. Fuel depots required layered security systems. And every new protective measure created more vulnerabilities humans somehow learned to exploit. The Zarvath military had entered the war expecting domination. Now it was drowning in maintenance and paranoia. Entire departments inside the War Ministry shifted focus away from offensive planning toward infrastructure protection. That alone was unprecedented. The Empire had never fought a species capable of exhausting it strategically without winning direct battles. Humanity was changing the mathematics of warfare itself. Strategic analyst Thelvar continued studying Terran behavior obsessively. His office beneath the Imperial Citadel slowly filled with recovered human materials, military manuals, historical archives, psychological profiles, fragments of literature and philosophy. The deeper he looked, the less human behavior appeared irrational. In fact, viewed through the proper lens, human warfare was terrifyingly logical. Humans did not assume stability existed naturally. That was the key difference. Most civilizations built societies expecting peace to remain normal once achieved. Humans never fully trusted peace. Their history trained them to expect collapse eventually. And because they expected it, they prepared for it constantly. This made humanity uniquely difficult to intimidate. The Empire relied on overwhelming force because overwhelming force shattered expectations. But humans already expected disaster. Fear still affected them. Loss still affected them. Yet neither condition stopped them functioning effectively. Thelvar finally summarized the realization in another restricted report. Humans psychologically organize around recovery instead of preservation. The sentence disturbed the Imperial Council deeply, because recovery implies something dangerous. It implies the willingness to survive damage other species consider unacceptable, and humanity demonstrated that willingness repeatedly. The Battle of Keras Drift proved this more clearly than anything before it. Keras Drift was not supposed to become a major engagement, only a supply interception operation near the outer Martian approach routes. Imperial scouts identified a damaged Terran convoy, moving slowly through debris fields left behind by earlier fighting. The convoy appeared vulnerable. Low escorts, minimal weapon signatures, poor maneuvering capability. An easy target. Imperial Captain Rel Voss ordered immediate pursuit. His ships entered the debris field aggressively, cutting directly toward the Terran convoy before it could escape. That was exactly what the humans wanted. The debris surrounding Keras Drift was not random battlefield wreckage. Human engineers had spent nearly 3 weeks repositioning thousands of destroyed ship fragments carefully through remote guidance systems. Tiny thrusters hidden inside wreckage, magnetic anchors buried in debris clouds, sensor reflectors masking true object density. The entire battlefield had been redesigned quietly before the Empire arrived. When the Zarvath ships crossed the center approach corridor, the trap activated. Dead ships suddenly moved. Massive wreckage fields shifted into collision paths. Communication interference exploded across local space. And hidden Terran attack craft emerged from inside debris clusters previously identified as harmless metal remains. The humans attacked from every direction simultaneously, not trying to destroy the Imperial fleet outright, trying to isolate ships individually, cut them apart, force confusion faster than command structures could react. Captain Rel Voss attempted emergency withdrawal almost immediately. By then, it was too late. The debris field itself had become a weapon. Imperial ships collided while maneuvering blindly through sensor distortion. Several fired accidentally on Allied vessels after target recognition systems failed. Human strike craft exploited every second of disorder mercilessly. The battle lasted less than 40 minutes. Imperial losses exceeded 17 capital ships. The Terrans lost 4 attack craft total. The aftermath terrified the Empire more than the battle itself, because battlefield analysis showed something deeply unsettling. The humans never possessed enough firepower to win through conventional means, so they altered the environment until conventional warfare stopped functioning entirely. That realization spread rapidly across military command networks, and with it came another dangerous idea. Humanity might be impossible to fight efficiently inside occupied territories. conditions deteriorated further. Human civilian resistance networks expanded constantly despite harsh suppression measures. Imperial commanders increased enforcement operations in response. Curfews, mass surveillance, movement restrictions, detainment programs. The pressure achieved temporary order briefly. Then the sabotage escalated again. Always again. That endless persistence exhausted Zarvath occupation forces psychologically. A confidential medical report from the frontier sectors documented rising combat fatigue among Imperial troops stationed in human territory. Symptoms included hypervigilance, sleep disruption, stress aggression, and operational hesitation during urban deployments. One military physician wrote something unusual in the report summary. "The humans have made our soldiers afraid of routine." That statement proved accurate very quickly. Imperial patrols entering quiet streets expected ambushes. Maintenance crews expected sabotage. Officers questioned secure transmissions constantly. Even successful operations produced anxiety afterward, because humans often used apparent defeats as setup for later attacks. Nothing felt stable anymore. And unstable armies make mistakes. Humanity exploited every one of them. The Empire's greatest humiliation came shortly afterward on Valor Station, a heavily fortified interrogation facility orbiting a frozen mining world near the outer sectors. The station held captured Terran resistance leaders considered too dangerous for ordinary detention facilities. Security around Valor was considered absolute. No civilian traffic, no external communications access, continuous military oversight. Then, one morning, every prison cell opened simultaneously. Emergency systems locked down instantly afterward. But not before the prisoners disappeared into the station itself. What followed became one of the most embarrassing incidents in Zarvath military history. The station entered full combat alert for nearly 19 hours. Security teams searched every deck repeatedly. Automated defense drones swept corridors continuously. Internal scanners detected movement constantly. Yet no prisoners were found. Finally, a transmission appeared directly on the central command screen. Simple white text against black background. "Check your cargo manifests." Investigators eventually discovered the impossible truth. The prisoners had escaped hidden inside outgoing waste processing containers cleared during the first 7 minutes of the emergency lockdown. The entire breakout depended on one critical factor. Human operatives outside the station had manipulated maintenance scheduling algorithms for almost 2 months beforehand. The escape began before the prison officials even realized an operation existed. That phrase appeared repeatedly in later Imperial analyses of human warfare. The operation began before detection. Humans seemed uniquely capable of fighting wars invisibly until the exact moment action became unavoidable. This created a terrible strategic imbalance. The Empire relied on reaction speed and operational dominance. Humans attacked the decision-making process itself. The Zarvath military still possessed superior fleets, superior industry, superior numbers. Yet somehow humanity kept controlling the emotional tempo of the war. That frightened the Imperial Council more than any battlefield loss. Because empires survive destruction more easily than uncertainty, and uncertainty now surrounded every Terran engagement. The turning point came during a closed strategic session beneath the Imperial Citadel. Only the highest military authorities attended: fleet marshals, sector overseers, war ministry analysts, strategic command representatives. Thelvar presented the final combat assessment personally. His conclusion filled the chamber with silence. "The Terrans are restructuring our military behavior," he said. Several officials demanded clarification immediately. Thelvar activated dozens of battlefield reports across the chamber holograms. Every major Terran engagement displayed the same pattern. Imperial forces increased caution after encountering human resistance. Increased caution slowed operations. Slower operations increased logistical complexity. More complexity created more vulnerabilities. Humans exploited those vulnerabilities repeatedly, which forced additional caution afterward. The cycle reinforced itself endlessly. Humanity was turning the Empire's own strength against itself systematically. One fleet marshal finally asked the question everyone feared: "What are you recommending?" Thelvar paused before answering, because he understood the significance of what he was about to say. Then he spoke clearly. Ban direct engagement protocols against Terran military personnel whenever alternatives exist. The chamber erupted instantly. Several commanders rejected the idea outright. The Zarvith Empire did not avoid enemies. Avoidance implied weakness, cowardice, strategic surrender. Thelvar listened calmly until the argument stopped. Then he asked one final question. How many more victories like this can we survive? Silence followed immediately, because everyone in the room understood the truth buried beneath the statement. The Empire was still technically winning the war, yet every month of fighting against humanity left the Empire weaker than before. Not destroyed, changed, slower, more afraid, more uncertain, and the humans seemed fully prepared to continue indefinitely. 3 days later, the Zarvith Empire issued the most shocking military directive in its recorded history. Priority Command Order 771. All Imperial personnel were instructed to avoid direct planetary combat with Terran forces, unless overwhelming strategic necessity existed. Urban warfare against human resistance groups required explicit high command approval. Close quarters boarding actions involving Terran military units were suspended entirely pending doctrinal revision. And most importantly, human soldiers received a new official battlefield classification, persistent threat organism. The designation normally applied only to uncontrollable biological hazards, not enemy troops. The order spread through the Empire rapidly. So did the rumors surrounding it. Within weeks, one phrase appeared repeatedly among Zarvith military personnel stationed near Terran space. If humans are nearby, leave before they decide you matter. The Empire had invaded humanity expecting obedience through fear. Instead, it had become the first civilization in galactic history to officially discourage fighting human soldiers directly. And deep inside the Imperial War Ministry, strategic analyst Thelvar quietly realized something even worse. Humanity had not reached its limit yet. Not even close. Priority Command Order 771 was never intended for public release. The Zarvith Empire classified it at the highest military level immediately after approval. Only frontline officers and strategic command divisions received full access. But wars create leaks the same way fires create smoke. And eventually, someone talked. At first it spread as rumor through occupation fleets, then through civilian trade networks, then across neutral systems, observing the war from a safe distance. The story sounded absurd when most species first heard it. The Zarvith Empire, the most feared military power in known space, had begun officially warning its own soldiers not to engage humans directly. Many dismissed the reports as propaganda until evidence began appearing everywhere. Imperial patrol ships avoiding close pursuit near Terran colonies, occupation forces refusing urban deployments without armored support, fleet commanders choosing bombardment over boarding actions, even when prisoners were strategically valuable. The pattern became impossible to hide. Humanity noticed it too, and humans understood immediately what it meant. The Empire had started fighting cautiously. That was the first real crack in Zarvith dominance, because caution slows conquest, and slow wars favor species built for endurance. The Terran High Defense Council gathered beneath Geneva Station shortly after intercepted fragments of Order 771 reached Earth. The chamber itself was small compared to older military headquarters destroyed earlier in the war. Simple steel walls, damaged lighting panels, emergency systems still visible along the ceiling from previous evacuation alerts. Human leadership no longer cared much about appearances, only function. Admiral Lena Mirik reviewed the intercepted orders silently before placing the tablet back onto the table. Around her sat military officers, resistance coordinators, logistics analysts, and civilian representatives from the surviving colonies. No one celebrated immediately. Humans understood something dangerous about fear. Fear makes enemies unpredictable before it makes them weak. Admiral Mirik finally spoke after several long minutes. "They're adjusting," she said quietly, "not panicking, not collapsing, Adjusting, that distinction mattered enormously, because humanity had spent the entire war studying the Empire exactly the same way the Empire studied humanity. And the Terrans had learned something important. The Zarvith military depended on control psychologically as much as strategically. Every campaign in Imperial history relied on maintaining momentum, confidence, authority, the appearance of inevitability. Humans had broken that appearance. Now they intended to break the structure underneath it. The new Terran strategy shifted almost immediately afterward. Until then, humanity focused mainly on survival and resistance. Now the objective changed. Exhaust the Empire completely. Not through giant victories, through endless pressure. Every vulnerable system became a target. Supply coordination, fuel transportation, repair infrastructure, occupation bureaucracy, communication relays. Human forces attacked the Empire's ability to maintain itself across distance, and distance was the Empire's greatest hidden weakness. The Zarvith had grown enormous through centuries of expansion. But enormous systems require enormous support. Humanity turned support into the battlefield itself. One operation near the Talvaran corridor demonstrated this perfectly. The corridor served as a primary transport route between several occupied sectors and the Imperial core systems. Destroying it directly would have been impossible. So humans attacked it indirectly. Instead, Terran operatives infiltrated automated cargo scheduling networks over several months using stolen administrative credentials gathered from abandoned occupation offices. Tiny shipment alterations began appearing gradually. Replacement parts redirected. Fuel inventories misreported. Maintenance windows delayed by small but critical intervals. Nothing dramatic individually. That was the genius of it. The Empire noticed symptoms long before understanding the cause. Ships waited longer for repairs. Convoys arrived with incorrect supplies. Station reactors missed calibration cycles. Logistical delays spread outward like disease through the transport network. And every delayed response created fresh opportunities for Terran resistance attacks. By the time the Empire traced the disruption source, the damage had already propagated across nearly 30 systems. Humanity had weaponized bureaucracy. The phrase appeared in several horrified Imperial intelligence summaries afterward. But the true disaster came later. The Battle of Acheron Gate changed the war permanently. Acheron Gate protected one of the final stable faster-than-light corridors leading toward Earth itself. If the Empire secured the gate, Sol system defenses would become catastrophically vulnerable. Both sides understood the stakes completely. The Zarvith assembled one of the largest fleets deployed during the entire conflict, hundreds of warships, carrier groups, siege platforms, heavy assault formations. Enough firepower to crush nearly any known civilization outright. Imperial command expected the humans to defend Acheron, traditionally, fortified positions, fleet concentration, defensive attrition warfare. Instead, the humans abandoned the gate entirely. At least that was what Imperial scanners reported initially. No fleets, no minefields, no visible defenses. The corridor appeared strangely empty. Several Zarvith commanders immediately expressed concern. Human silence. Now frightened, experienced officers, more than active resistance sometimes. But strategic pressure overruled caution. The fleet advanced deep into the corridor. That was exactly what humanity intended. 3 years before the war, Terran engineers had secretly installed experimental gravitational monitoring arrays throughout the Acheron system during civilian infrastructure expansion. The arrays were designed originally for navigation research. During the war, humans repurposed them into weapons. As the Imperial fleet entered the center corridor, hidden Terran stations activated the entire network simultaneously. Artificial gravitational distortions rippled through local space without warning. Navigation systems failed instantly. Formation integrity collapsed. Faster-than-light synchronization fields destabilized violently, and then the ambush began. Human fleets emerged from concealed positions behind shattered moons, inside debris fields, even hidden beneath thermal masking systems. Attached to drifting asteroid fragments, the Terrans attacked from impossible angles simultaneously. not targeting the largest warships first, targeting command coordination itself. Communication relays exploded. Navigation arrays failed. Sensor systems drowned beneath interference storms, generated by hidden satellites, activated moments before engagement. The Empire's greatest strength, centralized battlefield coordination, vanished almost immediately. The Battle of Acheron Gate lasted 9 hours. By the end, 83 Zarveth warships were destroyed or captured. Dozens more retreated heavily damaged. Human losses were severe too, but strategically irrelevant compared to what the battle accomplished. For the first time in recorded history, a major Zarveth offensive had collapsed completely against a technologically inferior species. The psychological effect across the galaxy was immediate. Neutral civilizations began reconsidering long-standing diplomatic arrangements with the Empire. Occupied systems grew bolder. Resistance movements expanded everywhere simultaneously. The myth of imperial inevitability was dying publicly now, and myths are difficult to rebuild once broken. Inside the Imperial Citadel, emergency strategic sessions continued almost constantly after Acheron Gate. Some commanders demanded escalation, planetary extermination campaigns, mass bombardments, total war doctrines without restraint. Others warned such actions would only strengthen human resistance further. The debates grew increasingly hostile. The Empire itself was beginning to fracture under the pressure of fighting humanity. Strategic analyst Thelvar watched all of this quietly from inside the War Ministry. He no longer focused on whether humanity could be defeated. That question had become secondary. The real question now was how much damage the Empire would suffer before the war finally ended. Because Thelvar understood something, most commanders still resisted accepting humanity had already won the psychological war. The Empire feared them now, not abstractly, operationally, institutionally. The proof existed everywhere. New training manuals emphasizing Terran unpredictability, mandatory caution protocols near human settlements, revised boarding doctrines specifically warning against close-quarters combat with Terran forces, entire sections of imperial military theory rewritten because of one species. No enemy had ever forced changes like that before. Then came the final moment, the event that transformed military caution into permanent doctrine. An Imperial assault carrier named Dominion's Spear intercepted a damaged Terran refugee convoy near the outer sectors. The convoy carried civilians escaping occupied territories toward neutral space. Imperial regulations permitted seizure. Standard procedure. Routine operation. The carrier deployed boarding teams immediately. 600 trained Imperial troops entered the convoy vessels, expecting terrified refugees and scattered resistance fighters. Instead, they found prepared humans, not soldiers officially, mechanics, engineers, teachers, miners, parents. The boarding operation became a massacre. For the Empire, the humans fought through corridors, maintenance shafts, cargo decks, and life support chambers, using improvised traps and coordinated resistance tactics developed through desperation and experience. Every compartment became contested ground. Every civilian became another obstacle. The battle lasted 16 brutal hours across 6 connected refugee ships. When it ended, the Dominion's Spear had lost nearly its entire boarding force, and the convoy escaped. The surviving Imperial officers submitted their reports personally. One statement from the carrier commander entered official military archives permanently. They were civilians, he reported. They fought like they had already accepted death and decided to make it expensive. 3 weeks later, the Zarveth Empire issued its final directive regarding humanity. Terran military personnel, resistance fighters, and armed civilian groups were all reclassified under the same threat designation. Direct engagement strongly discouraged. Long-term occupation operations suspended indefinitely, and, most importantly, human soldiers were officially banned from standard Imperial battlefield doctrine entirely. Future conflicts involving Terrans required specialized containment strategy approval directly from High Command. The galaxy reacted with disbelief when the directive eventually leaked publicly. An empire that conquered 19 civilizations had rewritten its military laws because of humanity. Not because humans destroyed the Empire outright, because humans convinced the Empire that fighting them cost more than victory was worth. Years later, after the war finally ended and borders stabilized once more, a memorial inscription appeared outside the rebuilt defense station above Earth. Simple words carved into dark metal. The Empire believed fear would stop us. They forgot humans learned long ago how to keep moving while afraid. And across the surviving Zarvath military academies, young officers still studied the human war carefully, not to learn how humanity won, but to remember why the Empire eventually stopped trying.